The topic of Marvel Rivals and Overwatch is on everyone's mind right now. Yes, despite what they might say, everyone typing, "Overwatch dead, Rivals wins," is in fact thinking about Overwatch. I mean, why else would they even say this? The reason for this is that it's blatantly obvious that Rivals and Overwatch are games of the same formula. I don't care how much they try to say it, I really doubt anything can get me to call them vanguard duelists and strategists. So then, the big focus of debate falls not to what formula for a game is better, but whose execution is better. But that's both not what we're here to talk about today, and exactly what we're here to talk about. I want to talk about some of the details of each game that I think could be improved, most of which are something the other game already does better, and in a place or two some things both games could easily improve. Let's not mess around, let's jump straight into it. I want to start with the most obvious thing in the world that still baffles me to this day about Overwatch: server choice. If you're like me, you very often get an extra 40 ping randomly on some of your matches, because Overwatch likes to dance you between servers that you're near to and ones significantly further away. Most modern games have the common decency to actually give you the choice of which servers you want to play on. This provides you with the freedom to decide how willing you are to wait a bit longer for lower ping game, or if you want games quickly and are close enough to more than one server location such that you won't mind a small ping increase. Rivals showed just how easily this system could be implemented into the Overwatch hero shooter formula, and it's a much, much nicer experience because of it, in my opinion. But I know why it's not in Overwatch, at least not right now, and that leads us to our next topic. The reason Overwatch is not willing to do this is because they're scared of the queue times players will see and thus make social media posts about if they're able to only select one server. The reason this is a problem is because Overwatch made a massive mistake in August of 2019, adding roleq to their game. Yes, because of this terrible community-splitting system, the game now has to struggle to find players for each role. And due to Overwatch's design and balance issues, there is always one role that has significantly less players than the other two. Yes, most of the time it's tank, but that does fluctuate. This is only one of a myriad of issues caused by roleq, and I made a really cool video recently about how Overwatch can solve this. Go watch that video to hear about it. But until a day where Overwatch changes back to a roleq-less world, Marvel Rivals will dominate the format debate no contest. And again, I already talked about this, but Overwatch's sad excuse for an openq does not help in the slightest. Go watch the video, I'm serious. Next, I want to look at the signature thing we've discussed in the past on this channel, the scoreboard, and the general idea of tracking player worth. As we've discussed in multiple videos in the past, both games' scoreboards are absolutely useless, at least within the context of how players use them, which is attempting to assess the contribution of each player. Like we addressed, the scoreboard is terrible at this, and people go a step further by only using a fraction of it. But there is an absolutely easy fix to this: Overwatch's on-fire system. Again, to cite past videos, I've proven that the fire meter, while not perfect, is by far the best metric for objectively weighing how much each player has done for their team's victory. Technically, both games have a system like this, though Marvel Rivals' Ace/MVP system is less accurate than Overwatch 2's on-fire system. And even Overwatch 2's on-fire system is less accurate than Overwatch 1's fire system. I'm not going to get into those details here, but if you'd like to see me talk about this more in depth in a future video, please do comment saying so. I am the expert on this topic. I even made a channel emoji about it. Both games would benefit greatly not only from improving their versions of this system, but also by tracking it further. Marvel Rivals has the decency to actually track their system throughout the entire game, and even point out who's carrying each team pretty starkly, but they fall short by only showing you the best player on each team. It doesn't matter if you're a close second place, or by far the worst player on your team, the game treats you all the same other than the best player on each team. On the flip side, Overwatch shows you the contribution of each player by having an individual on-fire display for each player, but falls short in that it doesn't track this contribution long-term whatsoever outside of doing the math yourself in the replay system, which is absurd. Both games would absolutely benefit from having some sort of score displayed somewhere on the scoreboard for both the entire match as well as in the end game screen. Again, we've discussed the downsides to this system, like sure, it can be misleading in the higher ranks where the game is more complicated, but overall, this would be an absolute massive benefit for both games, especially in the metal ranks, or when someone is being toxic. To springboard off of that actually, I'd like to talk a bit about the end of each game. At the end in Overwatch, you get to see a cool highlight intro before some random play where someone accidentally boops someone else off the map. But in Marvel Rivals, you instead get a highlight intro for the MVP of the match. Rivals system here is eons ahead of Overwatch. I get that play of the game is so ingrained into Overwatch culture at this point, but it's outdated and honestly a terrible system overall. But it would be incredibly easy to make it awesome. All the Overwatch devs have to do is adopt Rivals' system of showing the MVP at the end of the match while using Overwatch's more accurate fire system, and then show a play from said MVP. The literal only change they would have to make, essentially, is that instead of showing a play from anyone, they make sure it's the MVP of the match. And Overwatch used to consider the MVP to be whoever was on fire the longest, back when endgame cards were a thing. This would absolutely solve the problems with play of the game, while not getting rid of it entirely. You know how some characters never get play of the game? Now anyone can get it, so long as they carry their team. And it will be more accurate than even Rivals' MVP system. The only possible downside to this is that play of the game might be a bit sillier than it is now, but we've had over 8 years with the system already, and if you can't admit the system is already silly and not great at choosing a play, then you're huffing copium. This will provide a more accurate, more equal reward system at the end of the game for players. And we don't have to deal with players who fed all game and say they carried feeling justified by their one good play that game. I hate that. For Rivals' side of this, all they would have to do is adjust their MVP system to be more accurate. Again, I'll discuss that another time, but from what I can tell so far, the calculation Rivals uses isn't so great, even when compared to the new fire meter. Moving on, we have a really simple one, but it's so important. Rivals needs a toggle mute. I'm going to give you the best Overwatch advice anyone can give you. Turn your monitor on. But here's the second best advice. Set your microphone to open mic, then bind a toggle mute button. If you haven't already realized this, then I just gave you a tip that may genuinely boost your rank. But communicating with your team is often essential to winning, and having to hold down a button to do so makes playing the game immensely more complicated than it needs to be. I still can't conceive why Rivals doesn't already have a toggle mute button. They have an open mic, but turning on open mic without being able to mute and unmute is absolutely mental. Please Rivals, I don't want to be silent, but I also don't want to commit an entire finger to hover over that button the entire game. Rivals already has so many inputs, way more than Overwatch. How am I supposed to press all of this and push to talk? Wild. Next is actually something both games can benefit from, that I'm taking from Overwatch 1 specifically. Rank rewards. But I'm going to take some creative freedom here and say it needs to be expanded upon. Before you say gold weapons, no, that's not at all what I'm talking about. I'm talking about sprays, specifically the top 500 sprays. If you weren't aware, those moving sprays you occasionally see in your games come from one specific place, being top 500 in ranked. I think most players don't even know this anymore. They see a moving spray in a gold game and they don't even blink. This was by far the coolest reward Overwatch has ever given, and still to this day the rarest thing in the game, specifically seasons 5 through 17. Before 5, you got the spray even if you didn't end the season in top 500, making it less rare, and after 17, roleq was implemented, meaning up to 2,500 players per region got the spray instead of just 500, making it immensely less rare. I could easily see these being re-implemented and even changed such that instead of just 2 versions, a normal one and a moving one, there could be one for each rank, with the final top 500 and one above all versions, again, having animated movement. This would actually make players feel like they earned something cool to commemorate how well they did, rather than just a weapon anyone can get with enough games, or a stupid thing next to your name that goes away eventually. Terrible. Finally, I just really quickly want to address netcode. I don't particularly know why this is, but for some reason I constantly teleport in Rivals, but never do in Overwatch. But for a game where superpowered movement is so integral, this is so frustrating. I feel like this fix will come with time, given it's a new game, but damn does it make Rivals feel a lot worse than Overwatch on slight ping. Okay, that's everything I can objectively say is better or worse about each game, but I think we can have a bit more fun. I'm gonna get really subjective here, and instead of saying where each game can improve, I'm just gonna talk about things I don't want to see implemented into the other game. You'll see. For starters, I'm actually not a fan of hero bans. I see the appeal, sure, but I genuinely think it's not the answer. I know that's a wild take given the climate of discussion recently, and I'm ready to be burnt at the stake for having an unpopular opinion, but I prefer when every hero is available. Like I've said before, people identify with their heroes, and while I agree people should generally have a wide hero pool, I'm typically not in favor of restrictions on how a player expresses their individual skill. That being said, it's not a big loss either. Much like how I mentioned in my Overwatch politics video that hero limits and max 3 min 1 restrictions on roles aren't that bad for the game, this isn't either. I stand by the fact that the problem with roleq is the Q, and while I'm not in favor of hero restrictions in general, like hero bans, it's not really a massive loss, just not my favorite thing. Moving on, I also don't want team-ups in Overwatch. I get why they're fun, but I dislike them conceptually. In Overwatch and Marvel Rivals, heroes often work together well because their kits synergize in some way. And that's cool, but I think forced synergy, where the devs decide that a character can only use a new ability if they have a certain other character on their team, is in general bad design. This isn't talked about so much in the hero shooter space, but I also come from the card game space, being a longtime Legend Hearthstone player. Technically a retired one, given I don't play anymore, and I played a lot of card games growing up too. Forced synergy is a big topic in those spaces, and I stand behind my opinion that it's a bad thing. I like when players find the synergy themselves in how they play their strategy, not being told to do it a certain way by the card text that specifically references another card, or characters having abilities only when they have another specific character. Like, for example, everyone always talks about Rein Zarya or Winston D.Va, but fails to mention how Rein D.Va and Winston Zarya are both really good comps with synergies less talked about. I really loved when Rein D.Va was the high-level meta. It's such a sick comp.
There's a ton of different team-ups that you can run. It allows for crazy compositions to be made in strategy, right? It's like there's all these interconnected abilities that allow players to form comps that encourage gameplay diversity, where like you have cross-role team-ups that allow for crazy compositions to be made that you couldn't make elsewhere.
People will say that team-ups make for more creative team comp design, but no, you aren't being creative, you're putting the square shape in the square hole. It's basically as much strategy as counterpick rock, paper, scissors was in Overwatch 2's 5v5. And we shit on that. Why is this considered better?
Counterpicking's not strategy. That's just rock, paper, scissors, no depth. I wouldn't even, that's barely even strategy. What was so beautiful about Overwatch 1, you had to make a plan and then actually execute it, right? But the individual tanks have had to become so strong, you don't have to, your execution matters way less. It's way more about what you pick. And that's not a fun video game. You don't have to be a god tier player to understand that or execute that. You could be an average player and understand that.
The better argument is that it's fun, therefore good, and that's generally true, But why not just give those characters those buttons anyway? Aren't the buttons fun? Seems illogical to say that they are fun and therefore good, but then to say you can't always have them. My stance isn't that it should be taken out of Rivals. I think that it kinda adds to the superhero vibe, which is what they're going for. I just don't like it conceptually, and thus don't want to see it in Overwatch. The only arguments that make any sense only do so within the context of Marvel Rivals. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Please like and subscribe. You have no idea how much it benefits both this channel and me and my family. We're really thankful for the support. Oink says hello to all of you, and thank you for all the carrots. Please remember that if you can, I have a join button, and anything you can do there would mean the world to us. And please join the Discord. I think it would be really fun to talk to you all more often, and maybe even game at some point. Thanks for everything. Bye!